The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to Rutland once again. Now we're used to the idea, aren't we, of villages having halls. Well, this particular place has got two halls. There's one here, which you can see behind me, and there's another one on the road literally just up there to my right hand side. Now why would there be two? Let's find out. It's all to do with the railway in this place. This is Manton. Manton, Manors Farm. Today in Rutland we come to Manton, which officially means Manors Farm. However, it also has another meaning which I think sounds way cooler. Welcome to the town on a rock. Manton stands on some high ground which has an underground water source running along its northern slope. As a hilltop village, therefore, throughout the centuries, the residents of Manton have been able to observe on all sides the rolling scenery of the Rutland countryside, with pastures grazed by sheep, cattle and horses. That's despite some dramatic changes occurring in more modern times. The construction of the railway is the most obvious. It passes under Manton via a tunnel drilled through the rock on which it all sits. In the 16th century, Manton was on a direct road route between London and Yorkshire. These days, the modern road, the A6003, sweeps past Manton to the west, meaning most traffic leaves the place alone. A largely agricultural village historically, the creation of Rutland Water in the early 1970s saw the loss of some beautiful countryside to the north, but to compensate, Manton gained some new and splendid views over the water at the western end of the reservoir, known as Manton Bay. Today, approximately 120 men, 130 women and some 35 children live in the 140 or so houses on offer here. They're all looked after by the unusual St Mary's Church, the village hall based in the old school, and the Horse and Jockey pub. The central point of the village is still a triangular village green with 3 lime trees planted to commemorate the coronation of King George V in 1911. It's a great little village, this one, so let's go. Here we go then with the map of Manton as it was in 1900. This is a really good time period to study this particular village in because it was just after some massive changes had occurred. Effectively, it's still the same village as it's always been in terms of its layout. It's always been centred on the green at the end of Stocks Hill, and barring a few areas of modern infill, most houses shown here are the same now. You'll notice that running through it from north to south there's a railway line, the Syston and Peterborough, which we're now very familiar with. It passes under the village via a tunnel whose portals are here and here. South of that tunnel the line splits into two, and that's the location of Manton's former station. The railway was built in the 1840s, drastically changing the village it was to run underneath. It's only since the station closed in 1966 that Manton has returned to being a quiet rural backwater. Let's get started with the northeastern corner, where you'll find 3 key landmarks. On this map they are the church, seen here, the school, seen here, and a pub, seen here. Only one of those is still the same as is shown here today, and that's the church. The school and the pub are a little different. The church is dedicated to St Mary, and it's a little unusual as they go because it has no tower, even though it has a structure that looks like one. It's actually just a rather wide bellcote. It makes this one distinctive, as most of the other churches in the area have fully fledged towers. There are 2 bells in it which were recast by Taylor & Co of Loughborough in 1920, and they still ring regularly. The history of St Mary's can be traced back to the 12th century when the original church was built on this site. It would have been an aisleless building with a small square-ended chancel. In 1200, a north aisle was added together with an extra bay at the west end, extending the nave to its present length. The chancel was almost entirely rebuilt in 1796, and externally it's entirely from that period. There was a restoration of the fabric in 1887, and the chancel was re-roofed in 1894. Now, in 1356, this church housed the Priory College of Blessed Mary. The founder of the college, Sir William Wade, is buried in the north transept. The Priory College was active until the dissolution of the monasteries when the land was given to Gregory, Baron Cromwell. Manton's Priory Road, though, remains as a reference to it. A brass plaque commemorating Wade can be found near the pulpit. And speaking of memorials, outside in the churchyard, there's a war memorial cross. St Mary's is one of only 3 buildings in the village which can be termed non-domestic dwellings. The other 2 are the Horse and Jockey pub and the village hall, which used to be the school. As a school, this opened in 1861, having been built on land given by E. W. Smith Esquire, the Lord of the Manor. A small stone-faced building, it cost £400 to construct. It was designed to accommodate 60 pupils, but like many other Rutland villages, Manton at that time was very much a farming community. That meant that many of the children would have been expected to work on the land at certain times of the year instead of attending school, and so it was rarely full to capacity. In 1943 there were just 23 local pupils, but in addition there were 13 wartime evacuees from elsewhere in the country. Later on, during World War II, 50 or more children, mainly from London and Kent, were billeted with families in Manton and Gunthorpe. They were taught separately from the village children at the Old Hall. Manton School was finally closed in 1948, and soon afterwards it was acquired for use as the village hall. Ever since 1952 it's been run by a management committee. The village hall almost closed in 1968 when it ceased to cover its costs. The situation was saved in 1969 when the main hall was let for a short time to the Polly Toy Company. They employed about 25 women, mostly from local families, to pack Action Man toys. I wonder how many of you had one of them growing up. Next to the village hall was the pub shown on the 1900 map. This was called the Blue Ball Inn. It closed in the 1970s before being converted into residential accommodation. It remains so today. Let's follow Priory Road now. You may notice along this street, in comparison to others in the village, several older buildings. There's a reason for that. In 1732, a severe fire swept through the village and caused widespread damage, so much so that a national appeal was set up to help in the aftermath. In spite of the disaster, many houses did survive, mostly on Priory Road. These included Stonefield Farm, Manor Farm, and a farmhouse called the Hollies. The Blue Ball also avoided the worst of it. Now, as I'm sure you know, people, if you've been watching me for a long time in my journey around Rutland, these villages are all sort of close to Rutland Water, which means they're close to the River Gwash, because Rutland Water was formed by flooding the Gwash Valley, by damming the river, and it sort of backed up around it and flooded the whole lot of farmland and stuff. There are some other rivers around here as well, though, and one of them is called the River Chater. Over here we have a street called Chater Close, which is named after it. Our second area concerns the southeast of the village, which has a lot of the newest houses here. They're located in this area to the east of the Croft on Linden Road. This part of the village also has a small park these days too. If you follow Linden Road to the west, you'll come to the green, which, barring 3 lime trees, is still the same as it is here. So off Linden Road is the village's playground on Chater Close. Known as Manton Park, this has skate ramps which are popular with the local children. Note too, there are allotments in this area. Well, you know, I couldn't just pass these and not film them, could I? I have all those fans to think about. Now we've reached the centre of the village, marked by this triangular green where Linden Road meets Stocks Hill. On it you can see 3 mature lime trees. These were planted in 1911 to mark the coronation of King George V. Let's head down Stocks Hill next, very briefly. There can be no denying that Manton has some pretty grand buildings. We've seen a lot of them already, but why is that the case here? Well, it was the arrival of the railways in 1848 which was the catalyst for the wealthy to build lots of enormous houses. Manton had a station that offered rapid travel to London and other cities. The ease with which you could get between the village and those cities was perfect for those who liked a bit of fox hunting. Manton gained an array of stables and hunting lodges, such as Manton Lodge Farm, the Grange and the Croft. The largest property of all in Manton is the Old Hall on Stocks Hill, but this was here well before the railway ever was. That said, it too was well equipped for hunting. As well as stabling, this once had a coach house, an apple store, maltings and several satellite cottages. It was built by the Heathcote family, and both it and the buildings that were associated with it are today much sought after residences. So if there's an old hall here, is there a new hall too? Yes, there is. After returning to Linden Road, we can see that. It's now Manton Hall Residential Home. So when you round the corner there, past the new hall, or Manton Hall Residential Home as it is now, you're met with this site, the Horse and Jockey Pub. Absolutely beautiful in the sunshine, I'm sure you'll agree. Can you just imagine sitting on one of these benches out here with a pint in your hand? It's a bit too early in the morning right now, but I imagine later, if this sunshine keeps up, people will be doing that just here. We'll talk a bit about the pub in a moment. First of all, we're heading down the side of it towards the cemetery. To the north of the village now, where we'll find the cemetery and the northern portal of the Manton Tunnel, although it's not very visible from the road. Take note too of this area marked here. That's where the Horse and Jockey Pub is located, the only pub Manton now has to its name, since the closure of the Blue Ball. After walking up St Mary's Road, we find ourselves in Manton Cemetery. You may have noticed back in the churchyard that there's a collection of well-weathered stones. They lean at every angle, presenting a charming picture. A small area on the western side of the churchyard has several stones for people who lived in Martinsthorpe. None of the stones in the churchyard predate the ones here. When it became full, this brand new cemetery was opened up on the western side of the village, and it's still in use today. At the cemetery, you're only a few yards away from the railway. While we've been walking around the village, we've actually been walking on and around it without even knowing. That's because it passes under the village via the tunnel. Now, excavating the tunnel under Manton was quite an onerous task. There were several opponents to the idea of it, most notably Colonel Robert Heathcote, who lived at the Old Hall at the time. He owned the land, and so any ideas of building a tunnel had to go through him. He would eventually give his approval, but there were conditions attached. The railway company could build the tunnel, but as a compromise they had to build him a new home to avoid any possible disturbance from trains running under his property. That's how New Hall, which became the residential home we saw earlier, came to be constructed. Within 2 months of the approval, the first navvies were working on the tunnel. There were hundreds of them, all living in a temporary hutted encampment. By 1848 the tunnel was half completed, but it took a while for it to be fully finished. It finally opened in 1848. Now, as we know already, Manton used to have a pub called the Blue Ball. When that closed, it left the Horse and Jockey as the only pub to the village's name. The Horse and Jockey was to be the venue for inquests held into the deaths of railway workers during the construction of Manton Tunnel, and there were a few of those. A typical example is that of William Tomlinson, who was descending one of the tunnel access shafts when the basket he was standing in turned over. He fell 40 feet into the works below, and after he was recovered, his body was taken to the Horse and Jockey, where it was left pending a coroner's inquest. Now, newly refurbished, the Horse and Jockey is the only pub on the cycle route around Rutland Water. Okay, so we're almost back to the start. I'll just let this car come past before I do anything else. Very narrow village in places is Manton. It's also quite a hilly place as well. Ever since the cemetery, I've been going up and down hills, it seems. And this is sort of the top of a hill here on St Mary's Road, where you get a nice little view of the church, and that's a good way to end this sort of walk around the village. We're not done with this episode though. Now we need to hop into the car, because we haven't yet seen Manton Station. Our last task is to make our way to Manton Station, or as close to it as we can legally get. Manton Station was situated to the south of the village, at the point where the line split in two at a junction. That junction can be quite clearly seen here, with the Syston and Peterborough line running off to the southeast, and the Kettering to Leicester branch heading due south. It's now used mainly by freight traffic, that one. No longer serving passengers, the station closed in the 1960s and the buildings are now used as a factory. The lines still remain though. Manton was seen as an important junction and the station was almost like an interchange. From Manton you could reach Nottingham, Leicester, Peterborough, Cambridge and Norwich. So as well as encouraging the nobility to travel to Rutland to enjoy fox hunting, the station was a popular embarkation point for getting to and from other major places. The station was able to provide lots of employment for the villagers when it was in operation too. Manton was full of porters, plate layers and signalmen. Several cottages were built here for railway employees on St Mary's Road and Stocks Hill opposite the forge. All of them though have now been demolished. This is made all the more interesting when you consider that the Syston to Peterborough line was never originally supposed to pass through Manton, but it did thanks to pressure from Uppingham. Uppingham's residents persuaded the railway company to redesign the route of the line and build the station at Manton, conveniently just 3 miles away from their town. That's why from its opening until the 1950s the station was sometimes listed as Manton for Uppingham. To get between Manton and Uppingham there was a horse-drawn bus run by Tiny Thorpe. It connected Manton Station with the Falcon Hotel in Uppingham from 1900 to 1928. Manton Station closed in 1966, leaving Oakham as the only railway station remaining within the county today. The signal box controlling this junction, though, is still operational. On the transport theme, here's a bit about the road system around here as we leave Manton behind. Nowadays, the A6003 provides the main through route here. In times past though, the main route was instead this road, which originated in London before passing through Glaston, Wing and Manton before reaching Oakham. There would have been a constant flow of traffic here, including pedestrians and those on horseback. Pack horses and horse-drawn carriages must have been an interesting sight for Manton residents. Its location on such an important route probably contributed to the prosperity of the village. The Nottingham to Kettering Turnpike, commissioned in 1754, resulted in a new route through Rutland, with new roads between Caldicot and Uppingham and Preston and Manton being constructed. From then on, Manton would have enjoyed the added spectacle of fast stagecoaches and later mail coaches, all of which came to an end with the railway era. The Nottingham to Kettering Turnpike is now the A6003. Okay, so with Manton visited, we can now move on southwards again towards our next village here in Rutland. The next one shares its name with a city in Lancashire and a village in the East Riding of Yorkshire. Come back next weekend and we'll tick it off this ever-shrinking Rutland list. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.